Good evening and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm Dhyanish, a product manager here at Grey Campus. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. All of your lines are muted by default, but we'll have some time in the end for questions. Please use the Q&A panel to pose your questions. As the sexiest job of the 21st century, data science is the silent song in the trend right now. Data science is revolutionizing the way in which we interact with the information. For the casual technologist, seasoned data professional, or anything in between, adding data science skills to your repertoire can be very lucrative. Since this is a new industry, there is a lot of confusion on where to begin. In this session, we focus on helping you with that question. In this topic, the topic of today is how to choose the right data science program for your career and also how Grey Campus programs offered in collaboration with IBM can help you accelerate your opportunities in this field. It's my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker and our course advisor, Joe San Pietro. As a corporate trainer, Joe leverages his Microsoft certified trainer expertise to deliver AI and data engineering courses to management teams across many sectors. Joe has also taught data science and software engineering at well-known boot camps. As a practitioner, Joe's sweet spot is working with companies in legacy sectors such as supply chain and distribution. Joe is quite active in Atlanta tech community and is a coordinator of PyData Atlanta meetups. So in my honest opinion, if you have any questions related to data science, Joe is the best person to seek an answer from. So before I hand it over to Joe, there's a quick poll. I request you all to take it. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Joe, who will take us through the presentation. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Danish. Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. As Danish mentioned, I'm Joe San Pietro, and I'm excited to take you through what I think is a really important topic of how to choose a program, and which is a big step in the in any new data scientist's career. So let's get started. Okay, so that's me. And let's talk about the first off today's agenda. So the first thing, if anyone had joined us during our webinar last month, we went through all the skills that are necessary to have in order to become a data scientist. And we'll do a quick review of those, because today we're going to then match up the specific the specific applications of those skills that you're going to need to learn from any data science program. And what we want to make sure is, as you go through and make your choice, that we that you're aware of the types of trainings that should be offered by any reputable data science course. And then we're going to talk about the which format works for you between online and virtual and in person, and there's many different combinations, and you'll be able to think about what might work best for the way that you learn. And then we'll talk about educational timelines in terms of, is a full-time program or a part-time program or a self-paced program best for you? And then finally, why career services are so incredibly important after or as you're finishing up a program and helping you prepare for a job in the field. So with that, let's move to the next. So skills review. So again, from last month, it was any data scientist needs to come with either one of three backgrounds. If you have a coding background, great. If you have a math and statistics background, great. If you have an analytics background, even better. So with any combination of those skills, it's great. If you have two of those backgrounds, that makes it a no-brainer. If you have all three, wonderful. And if you have one, You probably have a learning curve to go up, but there's, excuse me, any data science program is going to be able to get you to get you experienced in the I'm sorry, is going to help you develop those other two skills. So let's talk about what any comprehensive data science program should have. We should a program should have um, teach you an object-oriented programming language like Python, and we're going to talk about R, the statistical language, and which might be better for you, and then um, teaching you how to clean data, how to what's called data munging as well, how to manipulate data and get it into a form that it can be fed into a machine learning model, and then teaching you machine learning, and then also deep learning. Now, I also have statistics down here as which we're going to get into a little bit more depth, but we only want to learn statistics through the lens of data science. We don't want you to have to become a statistician per se. All right. So first off, Python or R? There's a ongoing debate, sometimes heated in the data science community, where you have some very passionate views about Python versus R. Now, 10 years ago, the popularity was definitely R, period. However, Python as a language has become incredibly popular, as you can see. Although it's fascinating to me that just a year ago, R's popularity had dropped down to 21, and it has gained a spot back in the top 10 a year later. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what that actually means. But I don't think that Python is in any danger of popularity, because it was number 4 and has now moved up one slot to number 3. And this is all versus all programming languages. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what Python. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. But Python, the way to think about it is this, I think, my opinion. If you're going to be involved in research projects, true research academic projects in data science, R is probably the way to go. That seems to be embraced most by the research community. If you're going to be learning data science in a company, for a corporate world, to go to work for a startup or anywhere from a small to large corporation, they've all moved on to Python. So kind of R for academia and Python for the company world. So I alluded to how we need to learn, the best way to learn for Python and statistics. Python in and of itself is simply an object-oriented programming language like Ruby or JavaScript or C#. It's the data science tools like Pandas and NumPy and SciPy that are actually written in Python that we need to learn. So we learn Python only as much Python as we need to know to be able to work with the data science, the analysis tools that are built using Python. So oftentimes I think folks think that there's something magical or data science specific about the Python language in and of itself. It's not. It's purely it's incidental. So, Dinesh, can you still see me?
Yes, sir.
I just got a notification that maybe not. Okay. we all know that Zoom is very popular during these times. So I guess they have they have some video quality issues during the daytime. Okay, so last, if you're going to, you can take Python to learn to build websites and web applications. That's not to the level of Python that that you need in order to be able to accomplish data science tasks. So to be even more clear, I think most people are familiar with Microsoft Excel. That had to be written in a programming language, and Microsoft Excel was originally written in C++. So much like Python, much like pandas and NumPy, et cetera, are written in Python to create an analytics application, Microsoft Excel was written in C++. Let's talk about statistics. So this is a little bit trickier. A lot of programs they do way too deep a dive into statistics, and with I think the intent of trying to make students statisticians. A data scientist is not a statistician. A data scientist uses algorithms that were originally designed by statisticians to build machine learning models. So, for instance, most people have had some experience with linear regression in the past. This is a mainstay algorithm that data scientists use to make predictions, and this is just one of a few algorithms that we use. We don't actually build. For instance, we wouldn't be building the concept of a linear regression from scratch. So there are a set number of algorithms that are available to us that we have to understand. That's the statistics part that we do have to learn. But as far as, I think there's also a perception out there. I know there was when I was getting into the field that we were going to have to create our own statistical algorithms from scratch, and that's for a research scientist to do with a PhD. So hence, graphically to show what's necessary to quote unquote do data science. We want to know just enough coding and just enough statistics in order to make us an effective data scientist. All right, so that's that first piece of that. So those blocks that I showed you a couple slides ago. So let's move on to data cleaning and munging. These are what you want to make sure that all of the programs that you're looking at offer you. So data cleaning, data munging. 60 to 70% of a data scientist's job is currently in data cleaning. That is getting better through the advent of additional tools. But when you think about it, it depends on the size of your organization, for one thing. Okay, I guess my screen popped out again. Good Lord. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop my video. Just keep going. All righty. Sorry, folks. It's a little distracting. Okay, so there are tools out there these days that allow data cleaning to go a lot easier for the average data scientist. Saying my internet connection is unstable. Okay. So we have, gosh, let me take a step back. Okay. What is data cleaning? We have two main parts, cleaning and formatting data, as I mentioned. So data is very, very messy. The good news about big data is that it comes from many different sources. The bad news is that it comes from many different sources. And getting the data into a format that it can be fed into a machine learning model is there's a specific set of steps that need to go through. Primarily, you can, unlike Excel, you cannot have any null or empty cells in your table. They all have to be filled with something, and there's a number of rules and tools that we use in order to be able to plug those gaps. So you need to be able to learn how to you need to learn these rules and the methodologies that data scientists use in order to create data sets that then can be fed into the machine learning models. Usually pretty standard part of most data science programs out there that I've seen. Now, on to machine learning. So it's funny, it's actually not really, I say it's not really machine learning, it's more like students learning because the machines already know how to process these types of mathematical or statistical algorithms. It's there, like I said, there is as I alluded to before, there is a handbook of specific algorithms, like we talked about regression, that a student needs to learn in order to be able to either make predictions or classifications or clusters of like for instance, when you're doing targeted marketing, customer segmentation, etc. All of those will be taught to you in any reputable machine learning program. I'm sorry, in any reputable data science program. Let's talk about deep learning. So deep learning is, this is where some schools have started to confuse it. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. But deep learning is a subset of machine learning. You have to have a solid basis in machine learning before you move on to deep learning. It's not like you can dive into learning deep learning and then learn machine learning. It doesn't work like that. Algorithmically, you need to understand the fundamentals of machine learning and then move on to deep learning, which is more advanced. And there's two components of deep learning. And I wish I could see everybody's faces because this is my face when I first saw it. Deep learning is based on linear algebra and calculus, and that is how it's straight equations that actually create the deep learning functions. And if these weren't your strong suit in high school or at university, don't worry about it. It's totally doable. Like I said, this is, any good program is going to teach you what you need to learn from calculus in order to be able to understand how to get from a picture of a panda or a chihuahua to actually being able to classify it as such. But hold on, Danger Will Robinson, or if you're updated to if you've been watching the Netflix version, Danger Will Robinson. Many data science schools are removing deep learning. They're removing this. It's a huge, huge pitfall that's occurring in the data science education world right now. The curriculum writers think that deep learning is too complicated for new data scientists, or what they call junior data scientists. In my opinion, there is no such thing as a junior data scientist. You either are a data scientist, or you're either practicing data science or you are not. There's no junior level, because every company or every organization that you would work with is going to have its own use cases that they want you to work on. Data science is a very broad field. So the reason why that is scary to me is this. So this is, again, we have data from about a year ago from LinkedIn. If you aggregate all the data science postings and the skills that the companies were looking for, TensorFlow, which is one of the main data science libraries, it's the most popular data science library these days. I'm sorry, most popular deep learning library these days. 35% of the job postings included that was a must-have, and I would suspect that number is even higher, because when they talk about AWS, which is Amazon's cloud service, and when they talk about usually Jupyter notebooks, they are implying that that they want you to have deep learning experience as well. So this number, like I said, is probably closer to 40%, and therefore you're going to need a program that once you've learned a mastery of regular machine learning, that you're going to be able to get the deep learning education that's required by future employers. So, like I said, kind of a weird thing in the market right now. It's purely, I think, an economic decision, and one that is not going to benefit those schools that have not embraced deep learning All right, let's talk about learning formats and timelines. So basically, and these days we're kind of down to one format, interestingly enough, right? But as things loosen up around the world, it used to be you had in-person and virtual. I've taught at a number of boot camps myself, and there was always the option of teaching in person, like on campus, or teaching virtual. What experience is that a combination of the two is the right way to go, or whether it be instructor-led in person or instructor-led virtual. The best combination, I think, these days is going to be an in-person instructor with some virtual. However, many folks don't have campuses in person, so then it comes down to, and the way it is, everything is virtual right now. Taking something virtual is important, and then it really comes down to the timeline, the pacing, as they call it, which we'll talk about next. So you have the option of going full-time, part-time, or self-paced. Full-time is usually what the in-person programs were reserved for. They generally range from 5 to 6 months. You definitely graduate with the skills to perform a data science role in a good program. I had a number of debates with our curriculum teams at different schools saying that wasn't the case. I'm like, well, if students are paying all this money to spend 5 to 6 months in the program, they better be able to graduate with the skills that are necessary to work as data scientists in a company. The cool thing too is that most companies, as I said, have their own use cases for data science, and they're going to take on new data scientists and train them in the specific areas, for the specific use cases that they have, which is definitely a plus. And there's very few industries out there that I've seen that actually still do training. So that's one cool part of being a data scientist these days. So, like I said, you also get instructor support. You want more than just support. You want instructor-led classes, preferably live, and you definitely want access to an instructor. Like I've always held the equivalent of office hours with my students, at least once or twice a week, depending on the amount of help that they require at the time. And so those are all the benefits. Now the drawbacks for a full-time program, almost 100%. I've never seen it. It's 100% of the time students have to quit their current jobs because you're required to spend at least 50 hours a week to complete the coursework. So for families, I mean, for anybody, it's a tough adjustment, but for families, the initial adjustment was difficult, but they generally, students who were serious about the program generally got into a groove with their families, and worked out that balance, given the fact that it's only 5 to 6 months. It's a lot more difficult. I mean, people do it all the time in university programs when they go back to school for their masters or PhDs that last years, right? So 5 to 6 months is something that is totally doable, with a really good return. Just got to make sure that you pick the right program, right? So, all right, so that's full-time. Now part-time. Part-time, I said, can be done in person or virtual as well. You want it to be essentially the exact same program as a full-time, except stretching it out over twice the time, so 10 to 12 months. What that allows students to do is to keep their full-time jobs, still graduate. Like I said, it's still the exact same curriculum, but the drawbacks that I saw are getting students to stay motivated through tough curriculum, like the statistics pieces, over a long period of time, because invariably, jobs and families are the most important parts of people's lives. So those priorities will become obstacles in terms of being able to continue on with the curriculum. It's almost 100% of the time everybody has had some issues that have come up, that are priorities above their data science curriculum. And some people decide to continue, others decide to pause. It's really difficult. I can tell you that if you pause, coming back is rarely, pausing with the expectation of coming back is rarely something that's worth that students end up doing. So it's really important, if you're going to start, just to stick with it and go through it. So most ideally, you would bang through the full-time program if you can. If you absolutely have to keep working, then the part-time program is totally doable. It's just going to require, like I said, it's a lot more of a marathon than it is a sprint like the full-time. And then last, we have self-paced. This is the one I do not recommend. Self-paced, even though it's usually the exact same curriculum as the full-time and the part-time programs, it's whenever you want to do it. Now, the problem is there is no or very limited instructor support, and the curricula are not self-explanatory. So you're kind of on your own to read through the material and to try to work on the labs, etc. And if you get frustrated, you're probably going to take a break, walk away, and who knows when you're going to come back to it. I know for me, the way that I learn, if I get too stuck on something, I'm going to put it down and just go do something more interesting, or I'm just going to reprioritize other things instead. So I've seen students really struggle with the self-paced option. It has the lowest graduation rates. There's a huge difference between the part-time, so the full-time graduation rate is the highest, part-time is second highest, and then it really drops off for the self-paced. So, and self-paced, some people think it's a lot cheaper. It's only marginally less expensive than the full and part-time programs. And so you're just not, if that's the goal, you're not usually getting much of a bump there. So, or a part-time, and having a mix of live instruction versus recorded lectures tends to work best for students. That's how most of the schools in which I've taught, that's how they do it, because it doesn't make sense. I think, by the way, full time, I should clarify, full time is not necessarily sitting in front of someone like me for 8 hours. At my age, I can't imagine sitting and listening to me talk for 8 hours straight. I could barely listen to me talk for an hour. Um, so it's not really, it's not an effective form of learning. So full-time program is generally maybe 4 hours of instruction a day, up to 4 hours of instruction, and the remainder of the day working on labs and having the instructors available, or TAs, some of the programs have, to support the student with their questions. And same thing with part-time is usually maybe 1 hour a day, 1 to 2 hours a day, depending on the week. I think most of the time I would teach my part-timers about, I think, 4 days a week for an hour, and then meet with them individually. That tends to be, for adult learning, that tends to be the most effective. Okay. Next, career services. So a lot of schools don't have them. A lot of programs just don't have them. I went to my first dip into the tech world was in a software engineering boot camp, and their curriculum was decent, but they overpromised and under-delivered the career services aspect, i.e., there was no career services assistance at all, which is super frustrating when you think that you're going to be paying for a program and they're going to be helping you at the end, and then you get nothing, and you end up chasing them around, and you find that there was no structure. They need to have an actual program to take students through once they finish their curriculum. So what should that look like? Well, there's three basic pieces to it. There's interview prep and support. There's profile building assistance. We'll get into that in a moment. And then the actual mock interviews. So the first part that's important is to get you prepared, because interviewing for data science jobs versus interviewing for coding jobs versus interviewing for non-tech jobs, it's very different, very different. So having, like, literally going through videos and written materials that cover these topics I can't tell you, this sounds trite sometimes. It's incredible. This is one of the most important pieces, getting you in the mindset of what it's going to take in order to be able to land a data science job. So, specifically sample interviews and questions. This is changing right now quite a bit, as companies learn what data scientists are and are not, which is, as we touched on in last month's webinar. Sample interviews help in that a lot of data science roles were being given Python coding interviews. It's like, what? I just spent the whole time, this whole webinar, telling you that what you need to know to become a data scientist and how much Python you need to learn. And suddenly you show up for a data science interview, but the company doesn't really have solid materials to interview their candidates, so they revert to what they know, which is to give you a Python coding test. And that's something that really trips you up. So you want a program that's going to prep you to also then teach you just enough Python to crack the interview. Most Thankfully, most companies that are hiring for data science roles are evolving. I've seen there's been a huge evolution over the last 6 months, interestingly enough, of materials that are geared towards actually testing for data science skills, the things that you should be learning in the program, and and only the Python skills that you would need to be able to work with those data science libraries that we talked about in the beginning of the webinar today. Finally, you need to be assigned a coach and work with those coaches who motivate and prep you for the rest of the interviewing process. Then, the profile building assistance. This is also incredibly important. This is like it's not like it is your online resume, specifically in GitHub. GitHub, in case you haven't worked with that service yet, is it's essentially think of it as like a Google Drive or a OneDrive for your code and the work that you've done in data science. This is where developers post their code and collaborate. So you would actually develop a portfolio of the projects that you worked on in your data science program and upload them to GitHub, which to be made public for potential employers. And oftentimes it's not even employers that you've sent an application to. Any good employer will be sifting through sifting through GitHub profiles and select candidates that they're interested in. So that's how active a community there is. So if you do start to interview for a data science job, definitely want to have this GitHub portfolio, and there is much like formatting a resume, etc. There is a good and a not so great way of doing it, and you need guidance. You need an expert to help guide you through that process. And then last, we have mock interviews, right? And those are I've touched on the different points that may be brought up in these interviews. You definitely want to role play it with someone who has experience and who's most importantly able to give you detailed feedback, because you never know how you're coming off in an interview, right? And how many times have you walked out of interviewing saying, I have absolutely no idea how I did or did not. It's super awesome to be able to have somebody to be able to take you through a mock interview who does know better and it can give you that insight. That'll definitely help you when you're applying for jobs. So those are the major points so that we're going to cover today. First, we did a review of the skills that we want to that you need, and then how to apply those skills into language and data cleaning and machine learning and deep learning and statistics. And then we went through a review of the program formats and the educational timelines, and then a review of why what career services are or should be, why they're so important. The last part is that the reason why I like the Great Campus curricula is that they touch on all of these buttons here. What drew me to working with these folks is that they actually have an ingrained focus in deep learning, like I said, which I cannot stress how important that is. And they believe in deep learning and will continue to offer it, in their programs. So, you want, again, it's critical that you have a educational provider that offers all of these areas and is committed to offering all these areas. And like I said, while a number of schools are pulling back, Great Campus continues to invest in them. So definitely a fan of their programs. So I will turn it back over to Dinesh for questions.
Right. Thank you so much, guys. If you have any questions later on, you can please reach out or leave an email to support@greycampus.com. We'll be happy to provide you with the information. I hope you all enjoyed the session today. Stay safe